This week on Vaticano, join us for the celebration of the World Day of Consecrated Life, for a deep dive into the plight of today's persecuted Christians, and for our final piece on the Basilica of St. Mary Major. For this and more, Vaticano starts now. In a long interview with the Italian newspaper La Stampa, Pope Francis once again repeated his thoughts on Fiducia Supplicans, the declaration on blessings published on December the 18th. The pontiff explained how criticism of the document comes from small ideological groups, adding that Africans are a case apart, since for them, homosexuality is something ugly from the cultural point of view. They do not tolerate it, he said. The Pope also stressed that his hope is that gradually everyone will be reassured about the spirit of the declaration, which wants to include and not divide, because it calls for welcoming and then entrusting people to God. Thoughts the pontiff had already shared last Friday, January the 26th, while meeting with the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith at the Vatican.
Queste benedizioni fuori di ogni contesto e forma di carattere liturgico.
These blessings, outside of any liturgical context and form, do not demand moral perfection in order to be received. The second, that when a couple approaches spontaneously to ask for them, one does not bless the union, but simply the people who have required it together. Not the union, but the people.
Non l'unione, ma le persone.
Along with almost the entire African continent, the Slovakian Bishops' Conference, the Hungarian Bishops' Conference, and the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church, and the Dutch bishops have also voiced criticism of the document. In fact, the Dutch Bishops' Conference stood in stark contrast to the Belgian Conference, which instead, back in 2022, had authorized blessings to any kind of couple. At the same time, opposition from individual prominent cardinals is also growing. After Cardinal Gerhard Müller and Cardinal Robert Sarah, it's now the turn of Cardinal Joseph Zen, one of the 5 signatories of the recent dubia addressed to Pope Francis. On Monday morning, the Holy Father met again with Cardinal Victor Manuel Fernandez, prefect of the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith. A new document on human dignity is expected, but also some further comments on Fiducia Supplicans, a topic that will surely be discussed next October with the second part of the Synod on Synodality. Instituted in 1997 by Pope St. John Paul II, the World Day for Prayer for Consecrated Life is intended to help the entire Church to esteem ever more greatly the witness of those persons who have chosen to follow Christ by means of the practice of the evangelical counsels. The consecrated life, Pope John Paul II wrote in his post-synodal apostolic exhortation, Vita Consecrata, is at the very heart of the Church, and ought for this to be celebrated.
Das Herz der Kirche ist einmal das Gebet.
The heart of the Church is prayer and charity, the apostolate. In religious life, in consecrated life, there are both. There are men and women who really devote their lives entirely to contemplation, prayer, and adoration, who withdraw from the world to pray for the world and the Church. The other pillar of consecrated life is a concrete action, the apostolate. Many communities have been founded to help people in schools, in hospitals, in missions, in development aid, in many areas of life. And in the consecrated life, this is lived in an exemplary way.
The Catholic Church celebrates the World Day of Consecrated Life on February the 2nd, the feast of the Presentation of the Lord. That is, the day when the Blessed Mother presented her Son in the temple and consecrated him to God. The day aims not only at thanking God for the gift of consecrated life, but also at promoting a knowledge of and esteem for consecrated life, as well as at inviting consecrated men and women to solemnly celebrate together the marvels which the Lord has accomplished in them. The day is particularly important as the numbers of vocations to consecrated life have been reported to be in decline worldwide, a reality which can be attributed, among other things, to the numerous distractions of our modern world that hinder us from hearing God's call. For this reason, Father Martin said, we must learn to be more attentive to our surroundings, as God speaks to us through people and events. And above all, we need to make time for prayer.
Also, das Gebet ist für
In my opinion, prayer is the fundamental prerequisite for discerning a vocation. I always say that if you want to discern a vocation, or if you want to go on a journey of discovery to find out what God has in store for you, then start praying. A twofold prayer. The first one is open my ears so that I can hear what you want from me. And the second one is I am ready to do what I have recognized.
auch zu tun.
Hello and welcome to this week's Vaticano Updates, the most important news from the Holy Father and the Vatican. Turkey. Pope Francis decried the attack by armed gunmen on a Catholic church in Istanbul, which left one person dead during Sunday Mass. Sunday morning, the congregation of the Church of the Nativity of Mary in a suburb of Istanbul was celebrating the Eucharist when two gunmen stormed in and started to shoot. Italy. In an interview with the Italian newspaper La Stampa, Pope Francis renewed his call for a global ceasefire, warning the world is on the brink of the abyss. In the interview, he said, there was the Oslo Agreement with the two solutions of the two states. Until that agreement is applied, true peace remains distant. China. Pope Francis created a new diocese in mainland China, a decision that recognizes diocesan borders drawn by Beijing. The Pope has suppressed the former apostolic prefecture of Yujixian, which had been a vacant see since 2008, and replaced it with the Diocese of Weifang, a city of more than 9 million people in China's central Shandong province. Vatican. The Holy See published a procedure regarding the steps for reporting financial anomalies to the Office of the Auditor General. This procedure will facilitate the possibility of so-called whistleblowing, or also raising concerns about potential abuses enforced in the legislation of the Holy See and Vatican city-state. And again, China. Thaddeus Wang Yusheng was consecrated Bishop of Zhengshu, in China, bringing an end to a 70-year-long sede vacante. The Holy See press office announced that Wang was appointed by Pope Francis as the Bishop of Zhengshu last December. The decision was in line with the provisional agreement between the Holy See and China. Thank you for watching this week's Vaticano Updates. In Rome, Andreas Tonhauser for EWTN Vaticano.
In a few moments, we'll be back with more on Vaticano.
There's no other way one can say, but this is a calculated attempt to decimate the Catholic population and to instill fear in them so that they can really drop their faith. But thank God they are holding fast.
In the shadow of oppression, North Korea, Somalia, Yemen, Eritrea, Libya, Nigeria, Pakistan, Iran, Sudan, and India emerge as some of the toughest places for Christians. Today, as religious freedom continues to dwindle, the persecution of Christians has surged to its highest point in 3 decades. The global stage witnesses a distressing reality, with believers facing unprecedented challenges in these regions.
2,000 years later, unfortunately, we see that the persecution continues.
C'è persecuzione ai cristiani.
Since the age of the apostles, Christians have endured persecution from opposing factions. In various corners of the world, Christians still grapple with existential threats emanating from both governmental bodies and other entities.
There are still those, and there are many of them, who suffer and die to bear witness to Jesus. Just as there are those who are penalized at various levels for the fact of acting in a way consistent with the gospel.
According to a recent report from the watchdog group Open Doors, over half of the global population resides in a country grappling with severe religious persecution, whether from governmental authorities or other entities.
The persecution of Christians, is a real situation. In fact, Nigeria counts as one of the highest places where Christians are persecuted in the whole world. And it's daily. Last Christmas in Jos, many Christians, Catholics included, were persecuted and massacred on the eve of Christmas. And just yesterday also I read about some other massacre in the same place, Jos. So that's a very terrible thing that is happening, where there's always the issue of, Fulani herdsmen, Boko Haram, unknown gunmen, and a lot of, actors, violent actors that are really targeting Christians.
In Nigeria, ethnic and religious conflicts have turned the nation into one of the most perilous zones for Christians globally. During the Christmas weekend, a horrifying terrorist attack in the Nigerian state of Plateau claimed the lives of almost 200 Christians.
So it's a real bad situation, and I must say that we are really facing that, terrible situation of persecution in the country, which really requires urgent intervention, not only from the government in place, but we also call on the international community that this situation cannot continue to go on. Otherwise, it will really lead to some other violent situation.
As in previous years, the latest edition of the annual World Watch List, released this week by Open Doors, reaffirms North Korea's standing as the most hostile environment for Christians on a global scale.
But when I actually discovered my faith in God, and this was then I was realizing, wow, the system North Korea used the biblical system to take out the word of God, and replace it with Kim. So they have a Trinity system inside North Korea. So leader, party, state. And they also have 10 ideological principles. Each sentence emphasizes, give absolute love, loyalty, devotion to the Kim family. And that is paraphrased from 10 Commandments. And they have every Friday criticism session to criticize one another, even you haven't done anything wrong, say you haven't given enough loyalty and time to the Kim family. So it is the same structure as Christians and believers. We go to church and we confess to God.
In North Korea, Christians face severe restrictions on their freedom of worship, with the grim consequences of labor camps or death awaiting those caught practicing their faith. In 2023, North Korea heightened its border controls with the People's Republic of China, further complicating the plight of Christians seeking refuge from persecution.
They would have been able to build this kind of almost perfect prison society and system. It is because they used the biblical structures. And so there is a huge spiritual battle. However, there are underground Christians.
As of 2022, Pope Francis has reiterated his willingness to visit North Korea, emphasizing that he awaits an official invitation from the authorities.
I stand with the Christian communities experiencing discrimination, and I encourage them to persevere in charity towards all, peacefully striving for justice and religious freedom. How can we remain fully human and guide this cultural transformation to serve a good purpose?
Pope Francis posed this question at the outset of his message for the World Day of Social Communications. The transformation is being brought about by artificial intelligence. Pope Francis addressed the opportunities and dangers posed by the new technology and how it affects the role and work of journalists. This was the same question Catholic journalists from across the globe addressed at a conference held at the Shrine of Our Lady in Lourdes, situated at the foot of the French Pyrenees Mountains. Co-organized by the Vatican's Communications Department, the 27th edition of the St. Francis de Sales Congress focused on Catholic journalism and the mission to speak the truth, even when people don't want to see or listen. This year, the theme was to discuss the role of Christian journalism in times of upheaval.
it is important to have exchanges of ideas and to create a network that is very, very important for us, for the dicastery for communication, to promote, not to be the leader, but to promote space and opportunities to create a network between journalists of different output, different media outlets, so radio, newspapers, televisions like the WTN.
Artificial intelligence was one of the themes discussed in Lourdes. While the conference participants debated and agreed on the dangers of artificial intelligence, also positive sides were shown. Nicolas Torcheboeuf from Switzerland presented his AI platform for church teaching called KT-GPT.
L'idée de KT-GPT, c'est de donner une réponse assez générale.
The idea of KT-GPT is to provide a general answer to the questions people have, and then we sought to structure this response to gain a deeper understanding of the subject. For example, we will provide an answer based on the teachings found in the Bible, then consider what the Church Fathers say on the matter, and also examine what can be found in the magisterium, such as encyclicals or the teachings of the popes.
KT-GPT only uses documents from the official Vatican website to ensure sound doctrine. While the technology can be helpful, the journalists were clear that it will hardly replace humans, nor should it. Also, Pope Francis stressed in his message for the Day of Social Communications that new technologies, such as AI, will never be able to replace the human journalist. He encouraged media to continue to report, especially from war-torn regions, because only direct and personal contact will enable us to grasp the absurdity of war. This was another central topic at the conference in Lourdes: journalism in war-torn places across the globe. Journalists face hostility and oppression, especially when reporting on terrorism and crimes. In Nigeria, violent attacks at the hands of terrorist groups such as Boko Haram or the Fulani herdsmen can pose many risks.
Because Catholics and Christians are targeted, invariably the journalists are also part of those who are targeted. 2 years ago, a Catholic priest, a friend I know, Father Chitunum, was one of the people who were massacred in his rectory by these herdsmen. So it's affecting the media. So a lot of the media now they can't go out to do their job for fear of kidnapping, for fear of massacre.
In the Philippines, Christians have also come under attack. One recent tragedy, the bombing of a Catholic Mass in December of last year, has sparked particular concern. Additionally, the digital space is becoming increasingly hostile.
We continue to be under attack because, social media is a place where many trolls abound, and sometimes when we report on something that is not favorable to government, we receive online attacks from different trolls or different supporters of government, and we have to weather these attacks.
The Catholic journalists came to Lourdes not only to discuss and learn from each other. An important part was also the times of prayer and celebration of Holy Mass at the shrine, a source of courage and strength, especially for those who are called to report on the tragedies of our time, without losing hope.
The digital revolution can bring us greater freedom, but not if it imprisons us. It is up to us to decide whether we will become fodder for algorithms or will nourish our hearts with that freedom, without which we cannot grow in wisdom.
We'll be back after a short break with more on Vaticano.
In 1613, Pope Paul V Borghese consecrated this magnificent chapel, located in the left nave of the Basilica of St. Mary Major. Constructed in a span of only 5 years, the chapel is a testament to the Pope's profound devotion to Our Lady, Salus Populi Romani.
È un Papa estremamente devoto alla Salus Populi Romani. He is an extremely devoted pope to the Marian icon Salus Populi Romani, preserved in the basilica, which is considered a true relic. The tradition holds that the painting was created by St. Luke the Evangelist, the patron saint of painters. Pope Paul V built a monumental chapel, very similar to the one that Pope Sixtus had built 20 years earlier. He enlists the help of a series of artists who had already worked in the Sistine Chapel, and who, in the meantime, between the Sistine Chapel and the Pauline Chapel, had worked at St. John Lateran, the Cathedral of Rome, for the Jubilee of 1600.
Per il Giubileo del 1600.
According to the expertise of Guido Santi, this chapel, designed by Pietro Bernini, the father of the legendary sculptor Gian Lorenzo Bernini, is considered the birthplace of the Baroque style. Gian Lorenzo, refining his skills as a young boy, played a significant role in constructing the Pauline Chapel alongside his father.
In realtà, in questa cappella,
In reality, in this chapel, we already find the first examples of what will be Baroque art, which will characterize all of the art of the 17th century, first in Italy, then in Europe, and later in South America and the rest of the world. The chapel is perfectly clad in marbles and adorned with large pilasters, made of a very precious marble called Broccoletto di Spagna. All the marbles used are extremely expensive. There is no room for thrift. Less valuable materials cannot be used because that would not honor the icon, considered the most precious icon in the city of Rome. Salus Populi Romani should be remembered not as the health of the inhabitants of Rome, but as the health of the entire Roman Empire, meaning the entire Western world.
Di Roma, ma la salute di tutto l'impero romano, cioè di tutto il mondo occidentale.
The altar is a precious reliquary crafted from stones and gilded bronze. This opulence is dedicated to Mary and is evident in numerous small details. Typically, elements not visible to the public were left unadorned, but in this unique case in Rome, all the concealed elements are coated in gold.
Tanto preziosa l'icona e il culto di questa immagine così importante.
So precious is the icon that the veneration of this highly significant image led St. Ignatius to celebrate his first Mass here. Pope Francis, for example, is particularly devoted to this image. Pope Francis came here exactly at 7 in the morning on March the 14th, the first day of his pontificate, to offer flowers.
14 di marzo, il primo giorno del suo pontificato, a portare dei fiori.
Pope Francis's devotion to Salus Populi Romani goes beyond that of his predecessors. He adorned the icon with the golden rose, and in a recent interview with Mexican broadcaster Televisa's N+ streaming service, Pope Francis revealed that he wants to be buried in this basilica.
Papa Gregorio XV,
Pope Gregory XV, Pope Sixtus, Pope Pius V, Paul V Borghese, Clement XI. From this point of view, Santa Maria Maggiore is a kind of small Vatican, precisely because many popes devoted to Mary wanted to be buried here and not at St. Peter's.
vollero essere seppelliti qui e non a San Pietro.
Pope Paul V not only wanted to be buried here, but like Pope Nicholas IV, decided to reside in this basilica and established his studio in the sacristy. During his papacy, he faced renewed religious tensions between Catholics and Protestants in Germany, which ultimately led to the outbreak of the 30 Years' War in 1618. His response went beyond financial support for the Catholic League. He also took a cultural approach, defending Catholic doctrine through the promotion of art.
Il vero messaggio dell'intera cappella è nell'affresco che
The true message of the entire chapel is in the fresco at the top, in the lunette painted by Cavalier d'Arpino, who was at the time the most important painter alive in Rome. In that image, in that fresco, St. Gregory Thaumaturgus is depicted showing Mary the text he wrote against heresies in the 5th century. Pope Paul V precisely chooses this theme of St. Gregory Thaumaturgus and his text against heresies in the Middle East to create a cultural and theological connection between the heresies of the new heresies, namely those of Luther, which in those years had created so much confusion in the Western Christian Church.
Nella Chiesa cristiana d'Occidente.
The Basilica of St. Mary Major stands as a living testimony to the early Christian faith. embodying the Council of Ephesus and devotion to the Mother of God, and witnessing miracles. It holds physical evidence of Jesus' humble birth, early depictions of Our Lady, and is the resting place of St. Jerome, a doctor of the Church. The Basilica is a significant site for the Council of Trent and a showcase of fine arts by Michelangelo, Bernini, and Baroque pioneers. This is why the Basilica of St. Mary Major is beloved in Pope Francis's heart, and Our Lady Salus Populi Romani serves as his spiritual compass.